There is a place at the bottom of the world where the rules stop working. Every other continent has been carved up, fenced, flagged, fought over. Every border you have ever crossed was drawn by someone who believed the ground was theirs. Then there is this place, a continent larger than the United States and Mexico combined, buried under ice thick enough to swallow mountain ranges whole, and not one country on Earth is allowed to own it. 7 nations have tried. 7 have drawn their lines across the ice, planted flags, printed maps. On paper, none of it counts. This is the one continent no country is allowed to own, and it is the strangest agreement humanity has ever kept. The world thinks it knows Antarctica, a white blank at the edge of the globe, penguins, ice, a postcard of nothing. But peel back the surface, and Antarctica is not empty at all. It is the largest freshwater reserve on the planet, a frozen bank holding roughly 70% of all the fresh water on Earth. It is the coldest, driest, windiest place a human body can stand. It hides lakes that have been sealed from the sky for 15 million years. It hides mountains no human eye has ever seen. And underneath it, in the last few years, someone has found something that could break the most successful peace treaty in modern history. To understand why this continent belongs to no one, and why that fragile fact is now under more pressure than it has been in a generation, you have to go down there, past the last islands, past the last ships, past the 60th parallel, where the map runs out of countries, down to the ice. Start with the scale, because nothing about Antarctica makes sense until you feel how big it is. The continent covers around 14 million square kilometers. That is nearly twice the size of Australia. About 98% of it is buried under a single sheet of ice, on average more than 2 kilometers thick, and in places nearly 5. Beneath your feet, if you could stand at the center, the frozen water would drop away for almost 3 miles before it hit rock. That ice holds 90% of all the ice on the planet. If it were to melt completely, the oceans would rise by roughly 60 meters. Not centimeters, meters. Every coastal city you can name would be redrawn or erased. And it is cold in a way that is difficult to hold in the mind. On the 21st of July, 1983, at a Russian station called Vostok, a thermometer read -89.2 degrees Celsius. That is the lowest air temperature ever reliably recorded on the surface of the Earth. Satellites have since detected patches of the high ice plateau, colder still, down near -93. At those temperatures, thrown water freezes before it lands. Exposed skin fails in seconds. The air itself feels like a solid thing. This is a desert. It almost never rains. Some interior valleys have not seen liquid water fall from the sky in around 2 million years. And it belongs to no one. So how did that happen? How did the one continent with no owner come to have no owner at all? The answer begins, like so many things in the 20th century, with the Cold War. The year is 1959. The world is split in two. The United States and the Soviet Union are pointing weapons across the planet, and there is a real fear that the ice at the bottom of the world could become one more place to point them. 7 countries have already drawn territorial claims across Antarctica: Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway, and the United Kingdom. Some of those claims overlap. In one incident in 1952, Argentine forces fired warning shots at a British party on the ice. The continent of penguins was starting to look like a continent of flashpoints. Then something unusual happened. Instead of racing to divide it, 12 nations sat down in Washington and agreed to do the opposite. On the 1st of December 1959, they signed the Antarctic Treaty. Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States. 12 countries, including bitter Cold War enemies, agreeing on a single, radical idea. The whole continent, everything south of 60 degrees, would be used for peaceful purposes only. No military bases, no weapons testing, no nuclear explosions, no new territorial claims. And the claims that already existed would be frozen exactly where they stood, neither recognized nor denied, unable to advance 1 inch further. It came into force on the 23rd of June, 1961. It was the first arms control agreement of the Cold War, and more than 60 years later, more than 50 nations have signed it, and it still holds. No one is allowed to own it. Say that again, because it is almost impossible to believe of human beings on a planet where we have fought over deserts, over rivers, over single stones in single walls. There is an entire continent, larger than Europe, that we agreed to leave unowned. For now. Come down to the ice itself. You arrive almost always in the brief window of the southern summer, because in winter, the continent tries to kill anything that lands on it. The sea around Antarctica freezes outward for hundreds of miles, and the outside world is simply cut off. There are no cities here, no native population. Antarctica is the only continent on Earth with no indigenous people, no ancient civilization, no one who was ever born here and called it home. For all of human history, until barely 200 years ago, no person had even seen it. What there is instead is a scatter of research stations, more than 70 of them, run by around 30 countries, dotted across a landmass the size of a continent, like a handful of lights in the dark. And the number of people is smaller than you would ever guess. In the depth of winter, the entire human population of Antarctica is perhaps 1,000 souls. 1,000 people on a continent of 14 million square kilometers, sealed in for months of darkness. In the summer, the number climbs to 4,000 or 5,000 as scientists and support crews fly in. That is it. That is everyone. The population of the coldest continent on Earth would not fill a single football stadium. They live in insulated pods bolted to the ice, at stations with names like McMurdo and Rothera and Concordia, and the loneliest address on the planet, Amundsen Scott, sitting almost exactly on the geographic South Pole, the southernmost human settlement in existence. To understand what a winter down here does to a person, listen to the people who have lived through one. Take Concordia, a French-Italian base high on the inland plateau, so remote and so punishing that the European Space Agency uses it as a rehearsal for Mars. Around a dozen people are sealed in for 9 months. For 4 of those months, the sun never rises at all. The nearest other humans are some 600 kilometers away, at a Russian station. Once the last plane lifts off in the autumn, no one is coming, for anything, until spring. The crew here are, by a real and measured standard, more isolated than the astronauts on the International Space Station. On the 10th of July 2020, in the dead center of that darkness, the station's doctor, a Dutchman named Stijn Toolen, noted the day's readings in his log, the way you might jot down the weather. Sunlight, none. Wind chill, -84. Mood, still okay. The cold and the thin, oxygen-poor air do quiet, unsettling things to the mind. One ESA doctor, an Austrian named Carmen Posnig, described finishing a hard run in the station gym, reaching to switch off the lights, and finding she had simply forgotten which number she needed to dial to do it. A small blank space opened up where a simple thought used to be, by months of low oxygen and endless night. Another doctor, the Briton Alex Kumar, compressed the whole ordeal into 5 words. You stop living and start surviving. They endure all of it for one reason. The treaty says they must. Under the agreement that keeps the continent unowned, the only thing you are really allowed to do in Antarctica is science. So science is what they do. And what they have found beneath the ice is stranger than anything on the surface. Go down, not metaphorically, down through the ice sheet, 3 or 4 kilometers of it, into the dark. Because Antarctica is not solid all the way through. Trapped between the crushing weight of the ice above and the faint warmth of the Earth's own heat below, there is liquid water down there, not a little. Scientists have now mapped more than 400 lakes beneath the Antarctic ice, some of them connected by rivers that fill and drain on cycles measured in decades. An entire hidden hydrology, a secret plumbing system, running under the frozen surface where no light has reached for millions of years. The largest of them has a name, Lake Vostok. It sits beneath 4 kilometers of ice, near the Russian station of the same name, and it is roughly the size of Lake Ontario, more than 800 meters deep in places. And here is the part that stops you. That water has been sealed off from the atmosphere, from sunlight, from the surface world, for at least 15 million years. Some estimates say 20 or even more. When the first human ancestors were learning to walk upright, Lake Vostok was already a locked room. For decades, no one dared open it, for fear of contaminating water that had been pure since before our species existed. Then, on the 5th of February 2012, a Russian drill team finally punched through the last few meters of ice and touched the surface of the lake. The pressure was so violent that water shot up the borehole like a geyser and froze in place before anyone could reach it. The following year, they sampled that frozen plug, and inside it, they found fragments of DNA, traces of organisms that had been evolving in absolute darkness, cut off from the rest of life on Earth for longer than the human story is old. Think about what that means. On this continent that belongs to no one, there is a lake that belongs to no century, life that never knew the sun, and it is only one of 400. Not far from there, buried under the East Antarctic ice, lies an entire mountain range the size of the European Alps, the Gamburtsev Mountains, detected by seismic waves in 1958, mapped by radar, and never, not once, seen by human eyes. There are peaks down there, valleys, ridges, a whole landscape as dramatic as anything on the surface, and it is completely invisible, entombed in ice. Antarctica keeps its secrets in the dark, and the ice, patient and enormous, keeps its own time. Come back up, into the light, and meet the one creature that truly lives here. It is standing on the sea ice, in a huddle of thousands, in a cold that would kill you in minutes. An emperor penguin, over a meter tall, the largest penguin on Earth, and the only animal that chooses to breed in the full ferocity of the Antarctic winter. The male holds a single egg on his feet, tucked under a fold of skin, and he does not eat for around 4 months. He simply stands, in the dark, in winds that can top 100 miles an hour, huddled shoulder to shoulder with thousands of others, each of them taking turns to shuffle to the freezing outer edge so that the whole huddle survives. When the chick hatches, it hatches onto ice. The emperor penguin cannot read a treaty. It only knows the ice has to hold. Remember that. It only knows the ice has to hold. Because in the last few years, the ice has stopped holding. For decades, the sea ice around Antarctica seemed stable, even growing slightly, defying the melt happening at the other pole. Then, starting around 2016, it began to fall. In 2023, it collapsed to a record low, wiping out an area of ice roughly the size of Greenland. In 2024, the second lowest on record. In 2025, the winter maximum reached only about 17.8 million square kilometers, the third lowest peak in nearly half a century of satellite measurements. The last several years have brought the lowest ice on record, one after another after another. At one British research station, Rothera, scientists have measured the sea ice at their doorstep every year since 1985. In 2025, for the first time, they recorded 0 days of sea ice. Not a low year, 0. The scientists watching this are careful people, and they choose their words carefully. Walt Meyer, a sea ice scientist at the American data center that tracks it, has said plainly that it is not yet clear whether the far south has entered a permanent new normal of low ice, or whether this is a passing phase that will one day recover. Nobody knows yet. That uncertainty is itself the frightening part. And the emperor penguin is caught in the middle of it. In 2022, when the sea ice fell apart early in the Bellingshausen Sea, 4 of 5 known colonies suffered complete breeding failure. The ice broke up beneath the chicks before they had grown the waterproof feathers they needed to survive. They drowned, or they froze. It was the first regional breeding failure of its kind ever recorded. Then, in 2025, came a study that shook even the researchers who made it. Using satellites, a team at the British Antarctic Survey counted emperor penguins across a stretch of the continent holding nearly a third of the world's population. What they found was a decline of around 22% in 15 years. Peter Fretwell, the scientist who tracks these birds from space, said the losses were roughly 50% worse than even the gloomiest computer models had predicted. The emperor penguin has been listed as threatened. Some projections now put it close to extinction by the end of this century. It cannot read a treaty. It only knows the ice has to hold, and the ice is letting go. There is a rhythm to this continent, a way it breathes between the human story and the indifferent one, and to feel it, you have to step away from the crisis for a moment and simply look at the strangeness of the place. Because Antarctica is not just cold, it is otherworldly. There is a stretch of it called the McMurdo Dry Valleys, and it is the closest thing to Mars anywhere on Earth. No ice, no snow, just bare rock and frozen ground, scoured by winds so relentless and so dry that, in some of these valleys, no rain has fallen for around 2 million years. Scientists test Mars instruments here because there is nowhere else on the planet so dead, so dry, so alien. There is a volcano, Mount Erebus, the southernmost active volcano on Earth. Its summit crater holding a lake of molten lava that has churned continuously for decades, glowing red against a landscape of pure white. Fire at the coldest place on the planet. There is an ice shelf, the Ross Ice Shelf, a floating slab of ice roughly the size of France, ending in a cliff of ice up to 150 meters high and 600 kilometers long. Early explorers called it simply the barrier because there was no way around it and no way through. And there is the ice itself, which is not silent. It groans. It cracks like gunfire. Great slabs carve off into the sea with a sound like the world tearing. This is not a still place. It is a living, shifting, breathing machine of frozen water, one that regulates the temperature of the entire planet by reflecting the sun's heat back into space. Down here, the map runs out of names, and no one is allowed to own it. But people have tried to take from it before. Turn back the clock to the era before the treaty, and Antarctica was not a sanctuary. It was a slaughterhouse. In the 18th and 19th centuries, sealers came first, hunting the fur seals of the sub-Antarctic islands nearly to extinction within a few decades. Then came the whalers. With steamships and explosive harpoons, whaling in the Southern Ocean became one of the great industrial killings of history. Hundreds of thousands of whales were hauled from these waters and rendered into oil. Go to the island of South Georgia today, just north of the treaty line, and you can still see it. Whaling stations like Grytviken and Husvik, abandoned mid-century when the whales ran out and the industry collapsed. Rusting boilers, ships half sunk at their moorings, orange with corrosion, great iron tanks that once held whale oil standing empty against the mountains. It is at Grytviken, in a small cemetery above that ruined station, that the explorer Ernest Shackleton lies buried. He died here in 1922 of a heart attack at the very start of one more expedition south, and his men chose to leave him on the edge of the ice he could never stop returning to. A man who had nearly died more than once trying to cross this continent, resting now for a century beside the rusting machinery of the men who came only to empty its seas. Two different hungers for the same white south. A place frozen at the moment the money left. This is what Antarctica looked like when it had no rules. And it is worth holding that image, because the treaty that keeps this continent unowned is not a law of nature, it is a choice. A fragile, human choice, renewed year after year by nations that could, if they wished, walk away. The question that hangs over the entire continent now is a simple one. How long will they keep choosing it? To understand why that question suddenly has teeth, you have to go to a specific stretch of frozen ocean called the Weddell Sea. It is one of the most remote bodies of water on the planet, ice-covered most of the year, and on the map it falls inside the territory claimed by the United Kingdom, a claim that overlaps with those of Chile and Argentina. And for the last several years, Russian research ships have been going there and firing sound waves at the seafloor. The technique is called a seismic survey. You send pulses of sound down through the water and the rock, and you read the echoes to see what lies beneath. It is the exact same method the oil industry uses to hunt for petroleum. In May of 2024, evidence submitted to a committee of British lawmakers made the reason clear. Russian vessels, operating for a state geological company, had gathered readings pointing to an estimated 511 billion barrels of oil beneath the Weddell Sea. If that figure is real, it would be one of the largest oil deposits ever identified anywhere on Earth, roughly 10 times the total output of the North Sea over 50 years, nearly double the known reserves of Saudi Arabia, sitting beneath a continent where mining is banned. Because that is the other half of the story. In 1991, the treaty nations went further than peace. They signed a second agreement, the Madrid Protocol, and it did something extraordinary. It declared Antarctica a natural reserve devoted to peace and science, and it banned all mining, all drilling, all extraction of mineral resources with no expiry date. Article 7, a single sentence. Any activity relating to mineral resources other than scientific research shall be prohibited. So officially, the Russian ships are doing science. Russia insists that its surveys are purely scientific. A British minister, David Rutley, told lawmakers that Russia had reaffirmed its commitment to the treaty and that its work was for research. But the scientists who study the politics of the ice are not so sure. Klaus Dodds, a professor of geopolitics who has spent his career on this question, put it carefully. There is a worry, he said, that Russia is collecting data that could be construed as prospecting rather than research. And he warned that the Antarctic policy environment is now arguably at its most challenging since the late 1980s. The line between reading the rock for knowledge and reading it for oil is a very thin one, and the only thing standing on that line is a treaty that everyone agreed to and that anyone could, in theory, abandon. This is where the story stops being about ice and starts being about us. Because the treaty has a date in it, a date that people love to misunderstand. The year is 2048. You will hear it said that the treaty expires in 2048, that the continent is up for grabs, that on that day the flags come out. That is not true, and it matters that it is not true. Neither the treaty nor the mining ban has an expiry date. Both continue indefinitely. What actually happens in 2048 is narrower and quieter, and in some ways more dangerous. From that year, any of the governing nations can request a conference to review the agreement. The rules for changing it are deliberately brutal. Any change would need the agreement of a huge majority of nations, and mining could only ever begin if an entirely new legal framework were built and ratified. It is designed to be nearly impossible. Nearly. But nearly impossible is not the same as impossible, and a great deal can shift between now and then. In the years just before that date, the world may look very different. The ice is thinner. The technology to drill in brutal conditions is better. 511 billion barrels of oil sit in the dark beneath the Weddell Sea, and the consensus that has held for 60 years is already showing cracks. In 2022, Russia and China together blocked efforts by other nations to expand protected areas in Antarctic waters. The machine of agreement, which runs entirely on everyone saying yes, is learning what it feels like when someone says no. The whole thing depends on a fragile idea. The idea that some places should belong to no one. That there can be, on this crowded and divided planet, one continent held in common, for science, for peace, for the future, owned by nobody and therefore by everybody. It is a beautiful idea. It is also completely unenforced. There is no army down there to defend it, no world government to rule on it. There is only the word of nations, renewed each year, that they will keep leaving the last unowned place alone. No one is allowed to own it. But that sentence is only as strong as our willingness to keep saying it. So come back, at the end, to the smallest character in this enormous story. The emperor penguin is still standing on the ice. The egg is still on his feet. The wind is still screaming across a continent that is larger than Europe and emptier than anywhere on Earth. Above him, invisible, the politics turn. Ships fire sound into the rock. Lawmakers argue in warm rooms half a world away about oil he will never see and a date, 2048, he will not live to reach. Treaties are signed and strained and, one day perhaps, broken. The penguin knows none of it. He cannot read a treaty. He only knows the ice has to hold. And that in the end, is what Antarctica is really about. Not the flags that cannot fly here, not the oil beneath the frozen sea, not even the strange and hopeful fact that human beings, for once, agreed to leave something alone. It is about a question we have never had to answer before. When we finally reach the last place on Earth that no one owns, the last continent still held in common, still wild, still white, still governed by nothing but a promise, what will we choose to do with it? Keep the promise, or come, at last, for the ice? Down at the bottom of the world, the wind rises. The sea ice, thinner than it has ever been, shifts under 10,000 penguins in the dark. It cannot read a treaty, it only knows the ice has to hold. If this journey moved you, consider subscribing. There are more forgotten places, more strange corners of this planet, waiting at the edge of the map. See you on the next road.